Hey folks, and welcome back. So in this video we're going to finish the modeling and texturing of the funnel tower. And I say modeling because we're actually going to do a little bit of that as well. In the previous part we created mostly textures for this actual tower part here. And we left the ring and everything connected to the ring for later, and we're going to do that today. And I think we're actually going to do a little bit of modeling as well, because I kind of think that this ring here needs a little bit more detail, so we're going to do that as well. So since last time I did a little bit of work, I solved the problem that we had with the specular highlight map. So now we have this kind of subtle specular highlight which reacts to all the dirt and everything on this green painted part, so it looks sort of like matte painted metal. And we still have the more pronounced highlights here on the galvanized steel parts. So the problem that we had last time was that ShaderMap, the program that I used to create the specular highlight maps, it used masks in a way that wasn't exactly how I imagined it, so I had to kind of work around that, but it's done now and it works. Another thing that I did was I modified this terrain a little bit around the base here, so added some mud and gravel and smoothed out this place a little bit. And actually what we will probably want to do is we would add some rocks here or something, just to sort of decorate this a bit further. Let's select the correct layer here, and we will want to do something like this. Maybe add some grass or something next to this to make it sort of sit in the terrain a bit nicer than what it currently does. But yeah, let's not go crazy with this today, because this video is going to be about finishing up the actual tower, so that we can move on to other assets. So I mentioned that we're going to do a little bit of texturing, actually modeling. We're going to do texturing as well, but we're going to do a little bit of modeling. We're going to actually modify this ring a little bit. And the more I look at this ring, the more it sort of seems like a very, very heavy and thick structure. And I think, like, compared to this part here, which has these sort of edges or ridges here, I think this just looks a little unnatural. Like this thing would not be like a solid ring of metal, but it sort of looks like it would be when it's this thick. So we're going to actually add a little bit of detail on the outside, and that actually means that we're going to have to UV unwrap it, at least partially. But that's fine. So let's open up our trusty blend file. And this is where we left off last time. So if you haven't seen the previous part where we created these textures and painted all the rust and detail and everything on these, then by all means have a look. But yes, so today we're going to look at the ring. And this is all just one mesh currently. And that's probably fine, to be honest. But let's disable the material for a bit. So I was thinking that I probably want to add a bit more detail to the outside of the ring. So the inside is full of these pads and stabilizers and everything that sort of are required to keep the system functional. And so in the lore of the game, these are sort of keeping some sort of magnetic field in place, so that objects can be can be transported through this ring in a straight line at very high speeds. And so I think we will keep the inside of the ring fairly smooth, but we'll do something about the outside to make it a bit more interesting and look a bit more realistic, perhaps. So let's add a few edge loops here. I'm just going to leave them in the center, and then we'll do the same thing for the top part, like this. And then what we'll do is we'll leave a little bit of space, because we have these stabilizer arms here attached to the outside, so we don't want to actually mess with that part all that much. So we'll take these and those, and then we'll do the same thing for the bottom side. Like that. And then we will scale them along the x-axis to move them a bit further apart. Like this, I think. And we have some extra edges here that we can get rid of in a minute. But now let's see if we just take these faces and then we do extrude along normals, but we actually don't extrude, but rather intrude, if that is actually a thing. We move them inwards a little bit. Just sort of have a look at what this looks like. I mean, this immediately looks a lot less sort of heavy, which is pretty much what I was going for. So yeah, I think this could actually work. And of course, what we'll want to do now is we'll want to take all of these and inset them by the same amount. Like so. And yeah, quite a lot actually, but not too much. So the problem that might appear here is that we might actually get a little bit of Z fighting if we push them too far. So let's not do that. Let's make sure that we don't move that much past the half point. And yeah, I think this probably works. This should be just enough detail to make the ring have a bit more sort of character. And I will want to do something about these edges here. So let's disable the extrusion tool. We'll get rid of these completely. So dissolve those edges, and then I think actually we'll want to do this. I'll dissolve those as well, and then I'll join these together. I think this is probably a pretty sensible thing to do here. Something like this. And of course this means that we'll have to re-UV unwrap the ring, like I mentioned previously. That should be quite quick to do. So I want to dissolve all of these, and then join these together. Whoop. Like so. And yeah, I think this looks nicer already. We might want to do something fancy with the shapes here at the ends, but I'm not sure that's really worth doing. So, yeah, I think we can leave it like this. I mean, you can always be fancier with these shapes, but it's like diminishing returns after a while. And yeah, doesn't this already look much less heavy somehow? I think so, at least. Yeah, at a distance these start to flicker a little bit, and I'm actually hoping to solve that by finally implementing multi-sample anti-aliasing into the engine. I've been thinking about that for a while. I still don't actually have that. I use something called SMAA, which stands for Subpixel Morphological Anti-Aliasing, if I remember correctly, which is like a post-processing thing, but it doesn't actually handle very thin objects quite as well as MSAA does. And you can even use them together for like the greatest effect. You can see the same problem here with this. Let's disable those icons. They can be a little annoying sometimes. But this railing here is flickering like crazy when you get to a certain distance from it. So we have kind of the same thing here with the rings, but that should be handled by MSAA once I have it implemented. And yeah, yep, this looks better. I think we're gonna go with this. Okay, so let's just quickly UV unwrap this now. So now if you go to this, and we have a material already set up for this, and it looks kind of similar to the material for the lower part of the tower. And I think what we can actually do now, just to make sure that we get the UV mapping working correctly, is we'll just bypass everything for a while and hook this up and use our UV grid texture like so. So we have almost everything set up already. We just need to handle these new parts that we added here. Let's actually disable that so that we can see our things a little bit better. I'm not exactly sure how to do this, but I think I'll add a seam there, and then I'll add seams to each of these corners. And that might actually work. It is curved though, so we're gonna have to actually see if that works properly. So let's unwrap that and see what we get. And now we could perhaps use the UV editor. And we can see here that there's a little bit of stretching going on. These lighter blue areas mean that there's a little bit of stretching going on, but it's not that bad. Here we have the parts that we haven't done yet, and you can see that the color is much more towards like green. So blue is what we want. That's the color that Blender uses for UVs that aren't stretched. Yeah, you can see that there's some pretty bad stretching going on here, but now that we added that seam there, that goes away. It looks good. So that seems to work. Let's do that for all the sides. So we do this, and then we do, yeah, we have to, oh. Yeah, undoing in Blender sometimes gives me a Python warning. I don't know why. I wonder if that's a bug in the version that I'm using. But I am using the long-term support version, so it should be pretty stable. But there are some things that can go wrong. as we actually saw in the previous part of this series as well, when the hue didn't want to update after we baked texture. Like that. Let's make sure we have what we want and nothing more, and it does look like that is the case. And then one more. And we are done. Whoop. Hop. Yeah. Let's try to be careful with what we select here. So there. And now if we unwrap it, we should get something much better, actually. Let's get rid of the texture behind it. We can see that. Yeah, we're wasting a little bit of UV space here, but I think that's probably all right. I do wonder if we want to have a bit more. We do have some margin there. I mean, it's probably fine. It's probably fine. And then, of course, we can have a look at the object itself to see that everything should be kind of nice. No crazy stretching going on somewhere. There's just a little bit of stretching going on here with this, but that's fine. That doesn't really matter. I think it was it perhaps that face, and yeah, it is this slightly brighter blue that we can see in the UV editor, but that's fine. Okay, so that's good, and now we can actually export this again, and now that we have the thing UV re-unwrapped, we might not actually need to export it anymore at all. It should just work with whatever materials and textures we throw at it now. Okay, so at this point we probably want to have a think about what kind of colors and materials do we actually want here. So we'll want to go with the same sort of style as the rest of the tower, and I think the ring itself, the ring sort of body is going to be this galvanized steel. So this kind of material. It does look quite good, and we have sort of the same thing going now with this sort of the same sort of silhouette almost as the horizontal beam here. So that's going to look pretty good. And what about these green round things, that the fixtures? We could of course go with the same green that we have here, but it might look a little boring perhaps. We have like the red here, and we have the black there. So we could go with either of those. I think at least like these things should probably be the same black as we have here. That sort of should look pretty good, as it's sort of an axle that goes through this thing. But yeah, I haven't quite decided what to do about this. Maybe we'll do the green and see how that looks, and we can later exchange it for something else if we want to. And then we have these pads, so these ones, and then the bigger ones here and here, and those are going to be black, I think. And then these are yellow and black again, and we have sort of established that already here on this smaller abandoned system. So this is not properly textured yet, as you can probably see. This is just using almost like single colored parts currently. I need to do this too pretty soon, but we already have sort of the same color scheme going here. We have like the yellow arms and then the black pads. So we'll go with the same for the big one. That should look quite nice. Yeah, so I think that's it. We'll start working on the material in Blender next. And I think since we're actually going to be using fairly similar materials, it probably just makes sense to actually take the material for the tower, which is what we created in the previous part, and just copy paste it into the ring material, because we'll actually want to have the galvanized steel, and we want to have the green base color. We could call this perhaps green painted steel. And then we'll need another, so this is the placement map for where we want the galvanized steel, and we'll obviously want to have a separate one for the ring. And then we'll want the same secondary color edge highlights and wear and tear passes, but we'll want separate maps for these as well. But otherwise the material is quite similar. So we'll actually we'll take everything, and we should be able to just copy paste it in here like so, and let's move it off to the side a little bit. Or can we actually, yeah, we can just delete everything else. And since we don't have these textures yet, we'll actually just disable these three now. So you can see it just goes sort of straight through. Just won't have any of the passes because we don't have the correct placement textures. We will need to immediately put in the placement for the galvanized steel though, because we can't really use it without it. As you can see, like, we do actually get galvanized steel and the base color now, but it's just appearing in crazy places. So let's put in a map immediately to handle that case. And unfortunately we have named this sort of stupidly. It's just galvanized steel placement map. It should probably be called like tower galvanized steel placement map or something, but we'll be a bit smarter now and call this ring galvanized steel placement map. And we can make it a 2K map. It doesn't need an alpha channel, and we can immediately set it here. So this is now the ring material, so we'll want the ring version, and you can see it goes away. That is to be expected. So we'll probably want to have a new folder for the ring work textures. So ring textures, and as I mentioned previously, these are not actually textures that I'm gonna ship with the game. These are just textures that we use to compose these materials out of different parts and layers. So now we can start applying the galvanized steel to various places. And so let's go into edit mode and sort of have a think about where do we actually want the galvanized steel. And we want it actually in, oh, not that. Let's try to select, can we select more? we can do this. Yeah, we can actually probably we can select these. I wonder how it doesn't make sense to select it like this. It might actually do. So I'll just deselect these ones that I don't want. So I'm I'm essentially selecting everything that is not supposed to be galvanized steel, so that I can then invert the selection. I think that is probably going to be the easiest way. So I should be able to just select linked everything here and there and there and there. Same thing with these guys. Let's actually delimit normal. Like I should be able to select everything. So once you start adding seams, it gets trickier to just select everything in an island, essentially. But actually, maybe we can use material. That should probably allow us to. Yeah, that gives us everything. Like so, and we still have some pads. Oh, there's one of these stabilizer beam emitters. And there's one there as well. It's kind of funny when you're making stuff up for like a sci-fi environment like this, and you have to come up with like names for all of these things. And I have like these are like stabilizer arms, and these are I don't know, stabilizer pads. Like I really don't know what I'm talking about, but you have to give them some names to sort of establish the thing that you're working on. And it can sometimes be a little difficult to come up with sensible names. But yes, the idea is essentially that these things create like sort of like a magnetic field, which creates a very stable linear path for something that you want to then transport at a very high velocity. And as you can see, like these arms are always essentially facing each other, and so there's going to be some sort of very strong magnetic field here in the middle. Okay. Anyway, now we have everything selected that we don't want to be galvanized steel. So now we can just invert the selection like so. We can go to texture paint, and let's make sure we have the correct placement map, and we do actually. And then we just enable painting only on the selected faces. And didn't have the strength to 1, so I have to click a few times, and that gives us galvanized steel on the ring. So yeah, I think this might work. This might work quite well. It remains to be seen what this transition here ends up looking like, but I think it should be quite fine. Obviously, we now have these places now being green as well, but it doesn't quite matter, because we can then paint the black using the secondary colors texture, just like we did with the base. There is one thing I wanna tweak a little bit though, and that is the idea that this whatever it is, beam transmitter here is supposed to actually point at this other one down here. Actually, we don't want to select both, but I'm actually going to rotate it a little bit. Oh, not around the cursor, but around its median point, just sort of by eye to to make it so that they actually sort of point at each other. It doesn't exactly matter, but that is supposed to be sort of the idea, and we can take both of these. And they're actually pretty well oriented already, so let's not do anything about it. Right. Okay. So this is our starting point now. And what we could do now is actually create the diffuse map, and that way we can create the material in the engine, and we can see all of the upcoming changes in the editor, which is always nice. So let's create ring diffuse, and again we don't need an alpha channel, so we'll save it here, I think. Yeah, save it there, and we can actually do our first bake to the diffuse texture, but we need to make sure we have it selected here. So that would be ring diffuse, highlight it and bake. And there we go. Here's the first diffuse texture, and we'll put it here outside the work folder next to the funnel tower diffuse and specular, and we'll create a specular texture for this as well, but we'll do that a little bit later, and we'll use the shader map program for that as well. Okay, so then we need to actually create a material for that and make it use it. So we have a funnel tower material here, and this is a material variant. So it uses the shader graph that you can see here in the background from something called base material diffuse specular. And that actually means that we'll have to put in some specular texture here. So we'll have to think about what we do about that. I think we can just put in a black one for now, and that should give it essentially no specular highlights at all. But yeah, we can actually just copy paste this. So we copy it and we create here a ring, and we use all the same parameters except we put here the ring diffuse, and we'll try with just the black texture here for the speculars, and material exported. And and one other thing that we might want to do, let's go to the asset browser here, and if we look at the ring diffuse, we can set compression on it, which is something that you typically want to do unless you have a texture with a very specific need for uncompressed data. So by default it's RGB A8, and this is an sRGB texture because it's color, and we can just put it to BC7, which is a block compressed format, very handy for your average normal textures, like so, and that should be fine. And then of course we need to make the ring actually use the texture, so we'll go to the research station blueprint, and we can actually open a preview here to make sure that it looks all right. And we'll find our ring here, and if we take the bin material path to our new material that we created, we can put it in there, and we'll see the change immediately here, and it does look all right. No no specular highlights yet, but that's to be expected because we have the black specular highlight texture there. Okay, so we can actually just disconnect that, and to make it show up in the editor we actually have to do something called a reload, because those blueprints aren't hot loaded currently, so we just do an unload and reload. And there we go. So it does look a little boring now because everything is green or galvanized steel. But when we get the secondary colors going, it should be quite nice. Should be quite nice indeed. And maybe we could actually do that next. Just sort of put in the sort of all of the base colors, if you will, and then continue with the details, edge highlights, and so on. And so we have essentially two secondary colors here. We have the black for these pads and for the transmitter here at the end of the arm, and the same black also here. It's not actually black, it's probably more like a dark gray. It's essentially like this color. And maybe we'll actually use a slightly different one for the pads. But anyway, a very dark gray or a black. And then we have the yellow for the arms. And maybe we could actually... I wonder what the mini transporter uses. We can probably find it here. Mini transporter. So here we can see the yellow that we've used for the mini transporter, when maybe we'll actually use the same here as well. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. So the next thing to do then would be to enable this pass. If we do it now, we'll get some weird colors, like you can see some of the red coming in here. So to fix that, we obviously just need to create its own texture. So let's do ring secondary colors, and we do need an alpha channel, and it is supposed to be cleared to transparent. Ring textures, and we'll save it there, and then we'll have to actually use it here. There we go, and now they go away again, which is to be expected. And we can paint them back in. If we go here to the texture painting, we probably want to actually pick those colors though. So if we go here, and we can open this in Affinity Photo, should be pretty good to use for this purpose. So let's pick the yellow. There we go. There we go. This is what I wanted. So we'll get the hex code is probably the easiest one way to bring it into Blender. We'll just copy paste, put it there, and add that, and then we'll want, well, we can pick this one as well, it doesn't quite matter. Like we can select it's the 30 30 30 and use that as well. We already have some quite dark colors here, but it doesn't matter. That's fine. Maybe we'll actually let's use like a slightly different one for these, the center of these fixtures. So let's go to texture paint mode, and we'll use ring secondary colors, and then we need to actually select what we want. So we want that, and let's actually just do this, and then whoop, like so, and select both of those, and we should have, no, should have nothing else, nothing except those two. That looks fine. So we go to texture paint mode, and only the selected ones, and we'll fill them with, I think, this one. And we can set strength to 1, so that should be it essentially. And then we'll go back to edit mode, and we'll select the top of everything that we want to be dark. Like so. And then we select more by just hitting Control plus. And that should give us everything that we want. And then back to texture paint mode, and we have only selected enabled. Oh, we're missing one there. Why didn't we get that one? So there we go. Now we should have everything. And then we select the color that we picked and paint it. Like so. That looks good. And then we do the arms. And voila. Save all the images. And we should now have the base colors for everything done. So now that we actually paint these using a texture, we have like a pattern coming through here for the galvanized steel, because we're sampling like a galvanized steel texture here. And for the green parts, even though it's not really that visible here, we actually have a sort of a metal grind texture here as well. But for the secondary colors, since we're just painting them using the secondary color texture, we actually, these are purely single colored now essentially. So we're just gonna have to actually paint a little bit of detail onto them when we get to that point. But that's fine. That's not really a problem. They're quite small, and if they were huge, I might want to actually use a similar system like this to have sort of a semi-generated pattern there as well. But this should be fine. So let's do another test bake. So ring diffuse, select that. And did I save all the textures? I did. That's important to do before baking, because otherwise you won't actually get the correct inputs to the bake. And save it there, and then we look here and wait a second, and it is going to show up. Right, so now we have sort of like have all of the base colors now in place for the whole object, unless we decide to actually add some more at some point. And so the question is, like, does this sort of work as a whole? And I think it does. At least well enough for now. And these red sort of covers or whatever these are, they really added quite a lot, because they're like the one thing that sort of stands out a little bit. I think that was quite a nice detail there. Okay, so if we progress through the material now here, the next thing would be edge highlights, and I think I'll just quickly do those for the whole object, speed up the video so you don't have to watch me do that, because it's sort of mechanical and monotonous work. And then when we have that, we can do a little bit of hand painting again, just like last time, and see if we are satisfied with that, or if we want to do something a bit more. Okay, so we now have edge highlights done for the whole model, and I'm just gonna actually quickly fix up some of these things that I seem to have caused here. The projection in Blender when drawing these and drawing on the model is not always perfect, and it sometimes bugs out a little bit, so you end up having to fix some of these things by hand. But generally it's quite good. Okay, so let's save this, and as usual let's do a test render of the whole thing to make sure that we have it looking the way we expect. So all images are saved, that's fine, and we have ring diffuse, and we press bake, and that should be it. And that looks pretty good. Yeah, so I think this is a pretty good example of edge highlights working quite well. Like we have these cavities, or whatever you want to call them, that we added earlier today. The edge highlights actually work really nicely with these, because they almost make it look like this edge here is slightly sort of smooth, and it just kind of makes it look like there's a lot more geometry than there actually is. And in addition, of course, to making it to giving it this slightly painterly art style, it kind of rounds off some of these edges a little bit, makes them look like they actually have more geometry than they have. So yeah, I think this looks quite all right. I did actually notice some problems here in Blender. So if we go really close and take a look at some of these things, let's see if I can find some of them now. So there's a bit of it's like 1 or 2 pixels white. That might actually be the thing we looked at earlier, where the edge highlight is actually, well, can't seem to remove it this way. But we have other similar looking problems here as well. Oh, there's actually one that we definitely can remove. So this one here. Oh, I know why we can't actually do that. Yeah, that's because we're painting to the wrong texture. Yeah, Blender is sort of, it's a bit annoying, because when you bake to the ring diffuse, it actually sets ring diffuse here as the active texture. So yeah, now we can actually remove that. So yeah, it probably wasn't that one. It probably was the lower stabilizers, where I saw quite a bit of similar looking problems. Right, so here we have, for example, one. Here's probably a texel somewhere in our secondary color texture that hasn't been set, and that's why it shows up as a black splotch on that. And I think I saw something similar here in other places. Yeah, like here is one, for example. There's one as well, and so on. And and you have more here in this. There is clearly something darker there, and these are typically, if we go have a look, where is the, if we go to the UV editor and then we see like, okay, so we're looking at this edge here, or face here. So if we have a look at the texture, we can actually see that, oh, there is actually a pixel there that's not completely covered. And I think we have the same problem probably here in the steel placement. Like you can see some of these, they have some imperfections here. And it has to do with a lot of things, like how you actually paint them, and how well you have UV unwrapped the model, etc., etc. So the solution is typically quite simple. You either fix it up here, or you bring it into something like GIMP, like I figured I might want to do here. So bring it in here, and we'll just fix it up by hand. So in this case, you can see here that actually we have one pixel here, which is for some reason hasn't been filled, and we have a few more here. Those probably caused the problems we saw earlier. And you can just go in and fix. There's another one. If you remember, we actually we painted this texture by selecting the faces and then using the fill tool. So it should have, ideally, it should have filled all of these, but sometimes it seems like the logic in Blender is a little bugged. And you may have to go in and fix these by hand. And I typically just do it in another program. Luckily, the data format is just a PNG file, so you can actually do this quite easily. Yeah, we probably don't need to fix all of them. But let's try to do the ones that sort of stick out. There's something as well that we probably want to have a look at. Go, and let's put one there. I think this part is starting to look pretty good. There's something that's looking a little weird. What do we have here then? Well, we have a few texels here that are actually worth fixing now that we are going at it. And yeah, it may just be that there's some like threshold value or something in Blender that I would need to actually tweak a little bit to avoid these kinds of things, but I haven't exactly found out what that would be. I think this has to do with how it sort of folds some of those UV islands, how it sort of wraps them, like the opposite of unwrapping. And sometimes the texture resolution just isn't good enough to cover these, and you might end up with like half a fragment or something getting or a fragment getting sort of mapped to like to a texel here which has the wrong color, and then it just slightly affects the fragment so that it looks bad, and then you end up with these weirdnesses. Right, let's do that as well. Right, and then we'll want to fix up at least this one, which is like sitting right in the middle of that. And maybe we can do these as well. Yeah. And we have something here as well. Let's do these. Fix them up real quick. Some of these aren't necessarily even a problem per se, but especially the ones that are sort of in the middle of something, they tend to show up. So I can just do that. And here we have one as well. Yeah, some of these are like right in the middle of the UV island. I don't exactly know how those come to be, but I assume they have to be sitting on an edge between two polygons or something, and they just, for one reason or another, just don't get projected properly. Okay, I think that's probably fine, and now the only thing we have to do is export this back to PNG and then go to secondary colors and reload it, and you can see the problem's going away. So if there are any left, then that's probably okay. We don't need to fix everyone. There are some other artifacts that can come up here when actually painting these edge highlights. Here, for example, you can see like well, the texture resolution here is quite bad. Now these are actually very, very small details anyway, and they're going to be pretty high up, so it doesn't quite matter. But you can see clearly the texels here. This line is not really smooth. But then we have things like this where you can almost see like two separate lines, and you have these things in the middle. You have these fragments or texels in the middle that don't get affected, and this is actually something that comes up when you have intersecting geometry. So So for this, in this particular case, you can see that we actually have we have two faces intersecting each other here. Like these yellow parts are not actually part of the ring, and that's why when you actually paint here, Blender just doesn't really know how to handle those cases cleanly. So you end up with this sort of weird looking jaggies there, but again, it's for our purposes it's quite good enough most of the time. And the edge highlights here also sort of almost gives the impression that these are sort of like fused together or something like that. So I think it works quite well enough for my purposes. Okay, so let's rebake. And save a copy to the game. Right. So I think this is starting to look quite nice now. I should probably do a pass with a little bit of hand painted details on some of these. One thing to keep in mind with this ring now is that it can actually be rotated, and indeed it is rotated differently for some of these towers. So we can't really draw a lot of detail that requires it to be like a certain way, because I've deliberately rotated it. For example, you can see here this upper arm is pointing towards this one, and this one is pointing towards the other one. So one of these is actually rotated like 180 degrees. So we have to keep that in mind when drawing these hand-painted details. But then again, I don't think we really required all that much. But maybe just a little dirt or something, and some of these sort of like scratches probably make sense to add to the ring as well. So yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I think that's enough hand painting for now. As with the previous parts, you can actually spend as much time as you want just adding detail and rust and whatever you want to these. But I went in and added some dirt and rust here and there and sort of went through these with a very loose hand, just sort of highlighting some of these edges and crevices, and same thing for these pads here. And I think this looks quite good. I actually recorded a part of this video already, where I went through and generated the specular highlight map for this, which is why you can actually see specular highlights now. So you can see the sort of sheen of the sun reflecting sort of nicely off this galvanized metal here. However, I actually had forgotten to switch back from my drawing display to my main display, so that take didn't really work out. But yeah, it wasn't perhaps that interesting anyway. I basically went into shader map here and generated this kind of oh, actually that's not the right one. I'm talking about this one here. So a specular highlight map where these are the galvanized steel parts producing this kind of you can see the galvanized flakes or small plates, whatever you want to call them, reflecting light such that it looks like an actual metal surface. But yes, I think we're pretty much done now. Let's just have a quick drive through the level to sort of to see what it looks like in action, or rather have a look at what it actually looks like in terms of scale and size. It can be quite difficult to judge scale just by flying around in the editor. But yeah, I think this actually feels quite good. And they sort of look a little weird, a little ominous, which is pretty much what I was going for. So mission accomplished there. And we can have a look at them from a distance here. You can actually see one of these towers from quite far, and I think that the silhouette there just looks quite nice and works quite well. It doesn't really tell the player like what it is, but that's kind of the idea here, that it's supposed to look cool but not be immediately obvious what it is, and I think it accomplishes that quite well. So yeah, like I mentioned, MSAA will make these look a lot nicer from afar, but as far as asset design goes, I think they work quite well. So for me, the next steps are probably just essentially doing the same thing for these guys, and so these are the old smaller funnel towers, and these are actually supposed to be abandoned, so I'm gonna have to actually paint in a lot more like rust and decay, maybe even remove some parts if they've sort of broken down over time. But yeah, now I have a really good reference to use when doing that, because I think the materials will be roughly the same. But yes, one more asset off my to-do list. That's always great. and I think this one turned out really well. If you like this kind of stuff, then by all means stick around. I'm gonna do a lot more of it in the future. It's quite fun to record these things while doing them, and I also keep a blog on the Madrigal Games website. If you prefer to read rather than watch some of these things, I sometimes delve a bit deeper into things in text form, so check that out. Link in the description below. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll see you in future videos. Bye.